Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for coming out in the
Weather.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming on this weather. My name is Bex. I'm the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have you all here with us tonight to celebrate simplicity. Let's have a few logistics to go over before we get started. We'll be doing a hand-raised Q&A towards the end of the discussion, so think of your questions, follow them typed, we'll get them answered. Afterwards, Mattie will be signing and personalizing where you checked in. We'll let you know when and where to learn for that when that happens. If you're joining us virtually live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of Simplicity online using the link in the description. I did not say anyone's name tonight. Mattie Lubchansky, Byron. We do a lot of events with them, and I learned tonight that I'm mainly the one doing events with them, and I didn't introduce them to any of my coworkers. So I was like, everyone knows who they are. Incorrect. They know. Anyway, okay. You all read the Eventbrite quiz, and you read the description of Simplicity, so instead I'm going to read my shelf talk report. Simplicity follows a world-weary academic as he sets out from the secure dystopia of NYC to investigate a long-standing cult in the Catskills. It is sexy, scintillating, queer, and one of those fictions that feel more real than the real world itself. I read it in one sitting, and I'm praying to God that Mattie takes it upon herself to write a sequel. Star of tonight's show, Mattie Lubchansky is a cartoonist and illustrator and the associate editor of Ignatz award-winning magazine and website The Nib. She is also an Ignatz winner, a Her Block Prize finalist, and the author of Boys Weekend, which we have here tonight for you to purchase. The Antifa Super Soldier Cookbook. She lives in beautiful Queens, New York, with her wife. Conversation extraordinaire, Grace Byron, is the writer from the Midwest based in Queens. Her writing has appeared in The New Yorker, New York Magazine, The Nation, Vogue, among other outlets. Find her at Emo Trophy Wife. Her debut novel, Herculean, is coming out in October. And we're not doing the event for it, sadly, but I expect you all to be there with us. It is one of my coworkers and I are also obsessed with it. It's one of our favorite books of the year. So tonight you can pre-order that. I'm just going to throw that out there. You can pre-order Herculean. You can obviously buy Simplicity, and you should buy all the copies so we can order more. And I'm going to go sit down now and enjoy the event. So without any further ado,
How are you doing?
normal and good.
Normal and good.
Normal and
Totally
good.
fine.
Normal and good, totally fine. Regular.
Regular.
Uh-huh.
I love regular.
Yeah, I'm just maintaining a perfectly.
Did
sort
you
of-
get caught in the rain?
I
didn't
didn't
ask you that when
I
you walked
didn't.
in.
I didn't know being caught in the rain at all.
Okay.
Though I did about 10 minutes after I left my house. A friend who lives around the corner from me was like, "I can't make it. The train isn't running to our station." And I was like,
I have been
"That's
doing
not
this.
true. I was there 10 minutes ago."
Yeah.
And he said, "Not anymore." And I just got here.
You
I
got the
guess.
last train
I got
out.
the last train out of Astoria. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe we should start for those who don't know.
Mm.
How did this book come about?
Yeah, so there's like two versions of this, which is one is I've always been really obsessed with like cults and like political separatism, and it's like very much in the air. It is not the only book I know of that is coming out soon that is about this kind of stuff. There's a book called Herculean that I really like that's very similar. But it's just sort of like, I feel like it's rife in the community or whatever, where like if you are a gay person, you know somebody or know someone who knows somebody who like went to a farm upstate with their friends to like, start a farm where everything's fine compared to, and then like the weirder answer is I was upstate and I was in a hammock and I saw a knot in a tree that looked exactly like a clitoris. It did happen. And I just sort of, I had like, I've been doing a bit lately, or been calling having ideas, receiving ecstatic visions. But I sort of did have like the in the book, the main character Lucius like has all these like sexy visions, and I kind of just had it. But it was not me. It was like, this like guy, and then I was like, who's this man, and what's he about? And I just sort of started spinning it up from there.
Do you have a favorite cult or commune?
Do I ever? So when I was doing research for this, I was reading a lot about like these like 19th century pre-Marxist socialist communes that are all over upstate New York and Ohio and Pennsylvania. They called it the burned over country because it was so lit with religious fervor. Which is this sort of cool thing that we used to say about places. We don't do that anymore. But I was reading a book that was about a bunch of these cults, communes, whatever. And some of them were religious, some of them weren't. The cult in the book is really based off of like my favorite one, which was they were called the Cabaists or the Icarians, and they were really obsessed with there's this French author and thinker called Etienne Cabet who lived in France in the 1800s, and he wrote a book called Travels in Icaria. That he wrote this book that's like, here is a utopia, and I've laid out what a perfect society looks like. And I just wrote a book of like my little blurbo walking around noticing what everything is, and just like describing what a utopia is. And all of it caught all this traction in France, and it was a lot of like middle class artisans and stuff got really obsessed with this book, and they would form Icarian societies, and they came up with a uniform. They'd like walk around in black velvet capes, and have meetings where they would like write a national anthem for Icaria and like imagine this place, which is very powerful to them. And then a bunch of them came to America to try to build it. It didn't work, which is why your trash is not being carried around by, and I quote, dogs of remarkable size and strength. But it's so cool. The book is unreadable, by the way. It's like the most like boring stuff on earth. But they tried it in Texas and Louisiana, and weirdly they almost made it work in the abandoned Nauvoo, Illinois, which is where the town of Mormons founded. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm just really obsessed with them, as you can tell. But like the idea of like there's this book and they decided to build that society is like central to this book. Yeah.
Do you feel like fundamentally hopeful about like the ideas of communes? Optimistic, curious,
I'm certainly
negative.
Yeah. I'm certainly curious. I'm definitely more positive than I was going into the book that I was writing, because it's sort of like a lot of this book is me having like a struggle session about this kind of thing with myself, where, yeah, like if you and your friends go start a farm, it's a very nice life for you and your friends, but it does nothing for the rest of us. Like global warming is still going to ruin your farm one day. And so that's just sort of like, I don't know what its efficacy is like long term for society. And it's like, I don't know, a lot of these groups, and it's also a thing that was fundamental to the founding of America, was like, we are going to build a society here that everyone looks at and envies and imitates it. And nobody does that. No one just looks at another society that they like how it looks and just does it. Like that's just fundamentally not how power is propagated. So like I've some very serious critiques of it, but the idea of it is very enticing, and I understand why people choose that life. And I kind of like, when I was writing this book, kind of like fell in love with the little weirdos that I populated it with, and I kind of it made me sad to think about their lifestyle not working.
Does it feel like it's not working by the end to you? Without, not giving anything away.
Yeah.
Does it feel like, do you feel that?
I feel like their philosophy is not incorrect. The way that they are carrying it out has to certainly change. Like you need to, you got to fight for it. Like that's just, you can't just be like, we're over here, we are not part of the world. We're gonna wait for everyone else to like catch up with us. I feel like you got to do something.
Well, that was one thing I wanted to ask about, was like, do you feel like this nonviolent commune is like, are you pro nonviolence? Because by the end, right, there's a very pivotal scene that involves violence.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm curious how you think about that in terms of like political speech or action.
Yeah, like I am personally not a violent person. I'm a coward, and I'm almost 40 years old and I have 2 heart conditions. Like it's not for me to be going out there and doing that kind of stuff anymore. But I think, direct action is very important, and resistance and that kind of stuff is it's crucial. And power has never been ceded non-violently even once. The stuff people point to, like I think about in like in the Philippines, the people power revolution. People talk like, oh, it was like this non-violent thing, there were 1 million people outside the palace, and they had to get helicoptered out. And it's like, yeah, 1 million people were outside. They thought they were going to get killed. Like, it's the implicit threat. And I'm not saying like everybody here needs to go pick up a gun and shoot a cop right now, because I would never say that. But so you can start there. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
The book sort of takes place in this sort of like techno-fascist company world. And I guess I'm curious about why you decided to have like this, the sort of post-apocalyptic world be companies as opposed to other options.
Yeah.
While still being very, militarized.
Yeah. I mean, I think because to me, the line is beginning to blur, right? And it's sort of like, what's the end game of like a state being run by capitalists? Is a state that is capitalist, like extremely, like why would it? I mean, the president's selling hamburgers and stuff, like, or what was the thing they're like actually starting to sell stuff to people now. Like, it's, I don't know, it just feels like drawing a very, I'm certainly not the first person to like, think of cyberpunk or whatever, which is not what the book is, but like that sort of conception of it, where it's like, if you leave this unchecked, like where does capital go? What does it do? And it just takes over. It just grows inside of everything like a cancer.
How did you decide to sort of section out the book in the way that you did? Because we sort of start in the commune, and then we sort of go back and understand why this character is in the commune, and then we move again.
Yeah, I just that was really just I had again in my mind just a really clear conception of the first couple pages of that. The first thing you see is like the main character like hanging out like a statue of the founder of the place, like walking in and meeting this person that he ends up falling in love with. Spoilers for the first 10 pages. But yeah, so that was just always the beginning of the book to me. I think it was just more, normally I'm not always like drop people in situ always, because sometimes that can get kind of annoying and it's kind of overused, but it just felt right for this. That wasn't like an intentional, like I have a craft reason for doing this. It was just sort of like, I think the most enticing stuff in the book is the community that he goes to. And I kind of wanted the city to be like a shock. Like, this is, I can't believe this is how people live. Like, this guy seems normal, Yeah.
The book is also sort of sectioned out with like the sort of imaginary archive. And I wonder if you could sort of talk about the role of the archive in the book, because there's so many different archives that are going on.
Yeah, so sort of the main character is an anthropologist, and so the book is sort of framed out where the first thing you see is like a class trip at a museum, where they're like looking at artifacts of the former New York state. And to me, it was sort of, I was really inspired by, you ever seen Kelly Reichardt's First Cow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and then you think of like Le Guin a little bit too.
I'm always thinking about Le Guin. Yeah. But, and there's also the thing at the end of, this is Atwood, but the end of The Handmaid's Tale, where they're like, it's like, it turns out it was a tape the whole time, whatever. But at the beginning of First Cow, sorry.
Spoiler.
Yeah, at the beginning of First Cow, the first thing you see is a dog digging up two skeletons, and then it's like, and then it flashes back to the story, and when you realize you kind of realize early on, oh, those two skeletons are the two main characters of the story, and it just has this thing that hangs over the whole movie, where it's like, these people are going to be crushed by history. Just like everybody else and everybody you know and everyone you ever will know, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we are all sort of going to get washed away in the tide of it, right? And it'll grind us all down to the bone. And I kind of wanted to have that similar feeling, like hang over the book. But specifically with museums is, there's like so much about this book to me is about like what is recorded and by who and for who and what venue. And I just think it's really crucial to think about that stuff. And I used to work in museums. I've spent a lot of time in them. And I'm very skeptical of the whole thing, because so much of it is like, it's to tell a story, but for who and by who, and for what purpose.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're anti-museum?
I'm not anti-museum. I'm extremely pro-museum, you know.
You
But
can tell us.
yeah. No, I love the museum. I think they're really important, but I think it's important to be skeptical of what's in there and why. And I was thinking, you know, the museum is more of a venue of like, it is the sort of engine by which we are told history in a lot of ways. And I just think we should be more skeptical of the kind of history that we learn and what we learn about it and who. And, you know, you can be told stuff your whole life and it's not even close to what happened, or, you know. So like I think so much of the book is like you'll see stuff happen and then like what's in the record is kind of not exactly correct. And it's like the unreliable narrator is kind of history to me. Yeah.
There's a lot of nude trans people in the book also, which I think was really cool. And oftentimes they're in an orgy.
Yeah.
There's like these sort of like systemic orgies happening at the commune.
Yeah.
When did you decide that was going to be like a large part of the book? Was that like always implicitly going to be really erotic?
Yeah. So again, like the first thing I had was this vision of like a guy getting railed by a monster. I don't know. That's funny. But you know, so it was always there, and my conception of the guy was always like he's very sexually closed off, and so much of the book is about him like sort of opening up, and which I think is just sort of a general thing that a lot of trans people have sometimes, and the orgies are an artifact of my other favorite commune group, which is the Shakers. Well, you think to yourself, Shakers, the one thing I know about them is they didn't have sex. That's true. But they did, their meetings were like insane. They would get nude and they'd run around in the woods and get in fights and stuff. Yeah. And my sort of conception here is like if they had sex, it would have worked out fine. Because they basically had a pretty good society going. Where like, you know, so many of these communes exist because of like massive societal upheaval and people feel like they don't have control over their own lives. And the Shakers, people were becoming Shakers just because it was a steady place to get a meal. And it was like one of the only places that was like during the early Industrial Revolution, like while capitalism was being invented, this was like this very stable place that wasn't capitalist. And and you know, the founder whose name escapes me at the moment, Anne something, you know, she was probably sexually abused when she was younger, and that's why they didn't have sex. So I was like, well, I'll solve that problem with a fighting orgy every night at the commune to like get everyone's yayas out, basically. But it was always in my mind sort of like the contrast of this person who is so closed off, like trying to like how do you integrate yourself into a society that's like completely at odds with how you are as a person.
What did you think about, or how did you approach sort of like the ethics of drawing trans people naked? Or like were you like conceptually thinking through how to do that, or were you just sort of like intuitively like I'm just gonna go for it?
Yeah, I mean there was a brief moment where I was about halfway through the book and I was like inking, which is like I'm going back over my pencils, drawing like the black lines in the book. And I like had this realization after like going over, you know, the trans bodies for the seventh time. I was like, they're gonna put this in the Barnes and Noble. And I was like, you know, my editor's not stopped me. No one told me to stop, so I just kept going. I don't know. I mean, I would have fought for it. I'm lucky that my editor and also my publisher is very good about that stuff and just sort of kind of let me do what I wanted. I mean, ethically, I don't think it's a bad thing to show sex in the book. I do know that we had to find, when you do full color graphic novels, they get printed in China. And the first printer they sent the book to would not print it. Wow. Not because of the trans bodies, though, because they thought there were too many human butts in it. Yeah, I went through and calculated it this morning, actually. And there was once every 8.5 pages on average, you see a naked human ass. So I'm going to try and get that up on the next book, I think. Yeah. I guess it's like,
yeah, good odds. When you were drawing all these sort of hallucinations and robots and mechanized police, what was the sort of differentiation of those things for you? Because sometimes it's sort of like this beautiful, majestic dog creature is actually a robot, and sometimes it's actually maybe a spirit or a hallucination or a dream.
Yeah. I tried to keep like a, this is where like having a visual language is helpful. Like sort of, you can tell that there's like things like in the color palette or just the way the lines are drawn that these things are kept separate. And I wanted them to feel sort of uncanny in the same way, but one to feel sort of pleasant and one to feel sinister. And the idea was like to play around with just like the way they moved and like the color. There's a lot of stuff with the color palette that I was trying out there. But I thought the idea was to sort of like have sort of like a smooth transition between the two things to sort of like, because we're following the POV of a person who's like really very unmoored psychologically during the events of the book.
Did you have any sort of visual or literary references that you were doing while you were going through?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a lot about Alan Moore did a run on Swamp Thing in the 80s. That is incredible. Steve Bissett is the artist, I believe. Pretty sure. But the art is incredible and the writing is amazing, but it's like in it, Swamp Thing is not a man. He is a forest spirit that thinks he's a man. And he mostly and he produces psychedelic yams out of his armpits. And mostly what he wants to do is get high and have sex with his girlfriend. But I thought the visuals in that were like very, again, like erotic.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge influence on me when I was drawing it. And also I was thinking a lot about Henry Selick, the director, who's a stop motion director. But all of his movies, he did The Night Before Christmas, but also Coraline and a couple others. In all of his movies, somebody ends up climbing into a weird sticky hole. And that was, in fact, the working title of this book was A Big Wet Sticky Hole, which obviously didn't go. I don't know why. But there was just a lot of, like, the original conception of the vision had a bigger, stickier hole in it.
Totally.
But
Wow. What, I guess, kind of going off of that, like, what is your process? Do you listen to music? I feel like a lot of prose writers are like, I can't listen to music. But I don't know if that's true when you're sort of inking and drawing.
Yeah, when I'm writing, I listen to instrumental music to put me in the mood. I was listening to, while I was writing, I was listening to a lot of, there's an album called Mother Earth's Plantasia by an electronic artist in the 70s called Mort Gardner, I think was the name he used. But it's music for plants to listen to.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And it's really great. And it's like goofy synth music, but I really loved it. And I was listening to that, and I was listening to a lot of the album Dope Smoker by the band Sleep, which is like one 45-minute long stoner metal song. That was just sort of like when I was trying to get in the psychedelic zone. And then when I'm drawing, I like watch whatever. Because it's like a different compartment of my brain to like listen to dialogue. And I have a tablet and I just like, I'll try to put on something I've seen before or I'm like, have like vague familiarity with. I watched, while I was inking and drawing this book or penciling and inking this book, I watched all of Star Trek.
When you say all of Star Trek,
all
the movies,
everything.
Every single
I watched
series,
100%.
the new ones.
I watched 100%
prequels.
I watched 100% of Star Trek.
For the first time?
Some of them were for the first. I'd only ever seen a couple of the movies in Deep Space Nine.
What is your favorite and least favorite of the franchise?
It's Deep Space Nine is the best one by a mile. It's about war, and it's got like a semi-canonically trans character in it from the 90s. But it's great, and it's just like it's a really wonderful show that's like incredibly written and often very bad, but in a way that I think is like fun. The worst one by a country mile is the show Picard.
I like that.
You
one.
like that one?
Yeah, I know it's not good, but it's fun.
See, that's my problem with it. I don't want to have fun.
I also love him. Patrick Stewart is a national treasure.
I love him so much.
I'll watch a bad show if there's a fun actor.
That's okay. That's a good point.
We were just talking about this.
We were just talking about this. Okay, I think like Picard, I think was a more watchable show than the worst show, which was Discovery, which was like the new
Is that the
prequel.
one where they travel back in time?
That's the one where it starts.
There's too much time travel.
Too much time.
I can't do that.
My next book is a time travel book.
It'll be good.
It will be good. But that show is just like, it doesn't make any sense at all, and the acting is really bad, and the writing is very bad.
Which one is that?
It's
I
it like
still
starts.
can't place
It starts before the original series,
and then it goes.
and then it goes like 3,000 years into the future,
Oh,
and they
that's a lot.
they waste. David Cronenberg is an actor.
What?
They waste him. It is.
Well, that's crazy.
I know.
Anyway.
That's why I'm so mad about it.
How do you place this book in your sort of canon of work that you're building? And with Boys Weekend and all, you also were sort of talking about all the work you've done before.
Yeah.
Like, does it feel like it's its own thing? Does it feel like it's a new universe? Does it feel like it's...
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it is kind of technically in the same, if you want to say, universe as Boys Weekend, where it's like it's 50 years after the events of Boys Weekend, but it is very much in my mind sort of like where Boys Weekend takes place like in like the 20, it's like 10 years from now. Like it's very not like the future, it's just like soon. Whereas this book is like kind of further afield, but there's like some of the same, it's like dumb stuff in the background. Like just the same companies exist, but it wasn't like, oh, these books have anything to do with each other, really. It's just like, here's what I think will happen to the world. But this feels to me, this book feels kind of like a new thing for me. Like it's way outside the scope of how my books are. There's not like straight up satire in it in a way that the other books have, to me anyways. Like I know there are jokes in this book and it is sometimes funny.
But it's moving.
But thank you. I kind of wasn't trying to make jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And like the jokes that are in there, that's just me doing it by accident because I'm so naturally charming.
Well, it's an incredible book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
How much do you feel like romantic relationship ends up being like a engine for political change in the book or in life? Either one.
I mean,
Whichever's easier.
in life, I think it happens a weird amount of the time. It's like a really good way to organize. It's to make someone be in love with you, probably. I don't know. Like I think in the book, it's very important. But it's like, how does this guy like sort of get used to the idea of being like he wants to be in this community so bad to connect with this other person, and then he realizes along the way. This is emotional spoilers, I guess. Like it's along the way he realizes that there's more. Like he actually likes where he is, and not just this one person. But it was important to me to like have a way in emotionally for him, and I think it's just it's like it's the important stuff of life is that he's closed off to love and sex, and it's like without that stuff. Are you a person? I don't know. Like you can live without love and sex, but I don't know. It just feels like fundamental building blocks of like community with people.
Are you trying to do asexual discourse?
Yes. No. No. Asexual people love people too.
Sure.
Like love can be a lot of things.
Yeah.
This one just happened to be romantic love because this guy's other hang up with sex.
Yeah, well, his ex is a big part of it too, to some degree, even if like that's not like a character we see a lot of. Yeah,
he looms really large over the book because he's correct. You see him very briefly, and he says one correct thing, then disappears for the rest of the book. So it just kind of like hangs over it.
Yeah. I haven't done an interview like this with a graphic novelist, so I hope this isn't a gauche question. But if you could have a TV show in the Mattie universe, what do you think you would make your little characters do? Or where would you want it to be sort of set in the continuum?
Oh, that's a really good point.
Like if someone was like, here's so much money.
Here's so much money.
Stack the room.
Would it be like a cartoon or would it be a live action thing?
I guess at your leisure.
They're
really like whatever you want, babe.
Whatever I want? Oh boy, that's a really hard question.
It's the New York Federal Tech Company, 2099.
I mean, I think the sort of the world that I built here is really, it's got a lot of stuff you don't see. I'm really obsessed with. There's some guys in this book you see for about 5 pages that I'm like completely obsessed with, which is the libertarians who like live in buried school buses out in the woods. I would love to just see what their daily lives are like.
It's not looking good.
It's not looking. It's really bad. But I've just been long obsessed with libertarians.
Did you see that article that was feminists can be libertarians too? It just came out.
Well, Grace, I believe that women can do anything.
I don't.
Wait,
women's wrongs.
What was the thrust of the article?
I didn't read it. That's my right to choose. I chose to not read it.
That's good. I can't read, so.
Well, you're very good at faking it. That's why you're not reading tonight.
That's right.
Yeah. What have I not touched on that you want to discuss? Was it different last night? Was talking about a lot of different stuff?
No. Let's see. We talked very briefly about.
We could do more talking about the clitorises.
Sure. You know what? I showed the photo of the wooden clitoris I saw to somebody the other day, and they were like, "That doesn't look like it." And I was like, and I realized, sometimes you're like writing something, and they're like, "Oh, she's smoking." It was marijuana in this instance. It was just a little high, I think, but it didn't really look like it. Anyways, what else do I want to talk about? Nothing I can really think of off the top of my head.
Should we do some?
I would take some
audience questions.
So after I finish reading this book, and presuming that I finish it within the next month before your book comes out, what should I read next?
Ooh,
great question.
What should they read next between our 2 books?
There's a lot of time.
That's a decent amount of time. What else could they read?
Mine isn't out till October, so.
A lot of time. The book that I'm always obsessed with and thinking about when writing my own work is Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed, which is another book about society and how it is organized. And to me, it's sort of a book about like every way you set up a society has problems. What problems do you want to have? Like nothing's perfect. And that's just something I try to carry forward when I'm talking about these like big ideas. Yeah.
This is like a very ignorant question to the art of graphic novel creation, but something that I am so curious about all the time. And I have a friend who is working on his first graphic novel, and he's writing it as a screenplay first, like to do the story. How do you like write it as like an outline or like a short story? Like how do you do the narrative? Because it's like a long narrative that you're sustaining. And I can't imagine that you're just like, I'm going to spend a lot of time making this art and then like decide what's happening retroactively somehow.
Yeah. How do I write? Like, what's the writing process look like? Yeah, every cartoonist is kind of different. The way I do it is I do like a really serious, like long outline of the whole thing of like, here's what it's going to look like by chapter. Like this book was 5 chapters. I was like, here's the chapter by chapter breakdown of what every plot point that happens, and just like write it out as a sentence. And then I do kind of write like what I describe as like a crappy screenplay, where it is just like panel by panel, page by page. Like I kind of have to turn it into math for like pacing reasons. I'll be like, I have 5 pages for this to happen, then 10 for this, 20 for this, just to like, because you can kind of do the math in your head of like how much space I want it to occupy, like the reader's attention or whatever. And then I'll start penciling it, which is the 3 things. A lot of people thumbnail, which I do sometimes, but not always. Like really complicated sequences. It's like draw like stick figures of like, what's the page going to look like before you start drawing it. But I just do a really tortured long penciling process where I kind of do it over and over while I'm penciling, because I have been doing it for too long to change how I do it to make it more efficient. Yeah.
At any given moment, do you have a lot of random ideas for future works you could be working on?
Oh yeah, to have like ideas while I'm working for future things. Yeah, I mean, I kind of just like keep a little note of like, what am I thinking about right now? Like I mean, I'm already in the middle of like, I finished this book last spring, and I'm already in the middle of, I've already written another script for another book, and I'm drawing it right now. sort of I'm just always like reading. I read a lot of nonfiction when I'm trying to like think of ideas. And what I'll do is I'll like read a nonfiction book and then go completely nuts and like highlight the whole thing and write a very long document with all my ideas about the thing I just read. And I'll do that until like a story sort of emerges. Anybody else? Josh.
Hello.
Hi.
So there's so many like different moving parts to creating a work with words and images. Is there a part that is like the most fun for you personally, where you get to and you're like, I'm flying now, or I'm digging in, and it's gonna take a long time, but like I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah, like what parts do I like to do the most? I guess is I think big like action set pieces are the most fun to draw. They are also the hardest because you have to really make them look correct. But they hold my attention the most. I think a lot about. You ever read Akira? The old okay. So there is in the book Akira. It's in like 5 volumes, and one of the volumes is Tokyo exploding for like 300 pages.
Wow.
And I think all the time with this guy drawing Tokyo exploding for like 2 years. So I'm glad I don't have to do that. I'm also not as good of an artist. But there's a sequence in this book that's like the last like 50 pages that was just an absolute like delight to draw all the way through. And I was like making sound effects in my house for like 2 months. And I was like, this is my Akira, Tokyo exploding for 300 pages. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose the clothes?
How do I choose the clothes? You think about what you want to convey with them first. Like that's like a character design thing, which is like kind of a holistic, like what you want to, the cool thing about graphic novels, you can tell a lot about the story without having to like actually write down the words. I'm like free from like saying people's thoughts essentially. But you can do a lot of characterization. So it's always like, well, what does this tell me about them? But like in this book where it takes place in the future, like fashion is its own thing. So I was just trying to like, when you see the city, sort of group them together with people having like similar, so to like sort of like lock in on what that tells you about them. But but most of the time it is what do I feel like, what is fun for me? Because you do have to draw the clothes so many times. Like, there's like probably 13 or 1,500 panels in this book. So that's a lot of shoe. Yeah.
You talked earlier about how there's a lot of cults, a lot of like crazy ideas coming out of this area in upstate New York. Why do you think that is? Like, what's special about this area that made this happen?
What's special about upstate that made all the stuff happen there? I wish it was like the Eric Adams like swag gems under Manhattan kind of thing. I think it's just that it's close to here. I think it's just like you're a bohemian artist living here and things get sketchy. And it's close enough to be close to the city, but you're not like in the city and you're not like in America, and I think just ideas spread by word of mouth, right? So like one person has the idea, then everybody else does too. But we're all like products of, I don't know enough about the 1800s generally to think about why it would be there exactly. But it's always interesting to me to think about like just being a complete product of your time and place. But it's just kind of inescapable. All the like Mormonism, right, is full of, which also came out of the same area at the same time, is full of stuff about space. Like there's tons of stuff about planets and space. And that's because telescopes, the technology there was a huge jump in it right before Mormonism was conceived of. So everyone was obsessed with space because they had like discovered Neptune. Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of a silly like logistical question about the craft, but how do you like keep your graphic manuscript or whatever the illustrations safe? Do you keep like it in a fireproof safe or something?
How do I keep my drawings safe? I work digitally, so I back them up like a maniac. Though I do have there's tons of from early in my career lost work that I don't have anymore because I kept it on one hard drive that broke and now it's gone. So like my old zines and all sorts of stuff from like 15, 20 years ago, it's just gone. So, back up your shit.
Could you talk a little bit about how you developed your visual style? Because a funny thing happened to me a couple of days ago, actually, was I was on a Zoom call with a coworker, and through their blurred out background, I saw like something on their wall, and I was like, "Is that a Lubchansky on your wall?" And they were like, "How can you tell?" And I was like, "I just can."
You can always tell.
I feel like you have a very like recognizable style from
Yeah.
you walk away. And I'd just love to hear how that developed.
Yeah. How do I develop my visual style? Yeah, I think it's just I'm self-taught, so it was never like this is me doing my best at drawing. Like it's people are like, wow, I love your like big bug eyes and your stylized stuff, and I'm like, that's just me. I'm trying to draw the thing as best as I possibly can, which is kind of true. But like, I mean, at this point, it's just how I draw. But I'm self-taught. It was mostly like me reading, like specifically, I think if you look at old Far Sides and old, not The Simpsons, but Life in Hell specifically, the old Matt Groening comic, those two things, if you sort of like zip them together, that's sort of where I'm at. And it's kind of like I just always just drew that way, and over time just sort of like refined it best I could. But I mean, the whole idea is to like is to be able to tell that it's somebody's work easily. When you're designing a comic character, the trick you're supposed to do is you're supposed to black everybody out into a silhouette, and you put your whole cast on a page, just blacked out silhouettes. And can you tell people apart? If you can, it's good character design. If it's not, you gotta work at it. You can do that with like every cartoon you've ever watched. Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
Aside from the bigger and wetter hole, was there anything else that you like originally thought of or got really attached to throughout the process, but then ultimately didn't make it to the final cut?
Yeah, is there anything I cut from the book? Yeah, there was. I had an idea early on. So like so much of the society is based on this one book that they all read and are obsessed with. They were trying to like build the society from the book in real life. And I wanted to show more of the book. I wanted to have like some diegetic book in there. And you see it briefly. You see like 1 or 2 pages. But it just didn't fit. I couldn't make it work. I realized that I was having a hard time making my art look different enough for it to like really work as a strange object. Like if I really had the director's cut of this, I would like hire somebody to like write and draw some of the book because I think that would have been fun, but it was basically cut for time. Yeah. Rachel.
Okay, so this is a process question.
Yeah.
But do you read your work aloud as you're doing it?
Ooh.
And also, do you share as you go? Like, does Jaya get to see the process, or are you very secretive as you're going along?
Yeah, about my process stuff. I read dialogue aloud. I kind of like act it out with myself. Which is why I'm glad there's doors in my apartment. But I mean, it's like I've heard of lots of both cartoonists and people who write scripts that work like this, plays, whatever. It's just like you kind of have to have the conversation out loud. I don't know what it's like writing prose dialogue because I've never really. I mean, I've written it, but not like professionally. But I just find it really helpful to just sort of like inhabit the people best I can and talk to each other. And then I do make people read it. I mean, my editor obviously, but I do make my wife Jaya read everything like too much. So by the time a book comes out, she's read it like 4 times. Like I make her read the script, I make her read the pencils because I'm a psycho. But it's also just like I'm so used. I mean, I was until a couple years ago very used to like the cycle of like putting stuff online where I write it and I draw it and I put it out and then like within like an hour I know if it was any good or if people like it. It's always good. But it's really such a long process without any feedback. So I'm really grateful for like the people I show my outlines and stuff. Like especially like this book, I outlined this book like 5 times because I kept changing what happened in it. and I was really grateful to like the couple of people I showed that to, and I had a lot of long conversations about that because it was really useful for me. Yeah.
Who would you trust to direct Mattie Lubchansky's Simplicity: the movie?
Who would I trust to direct the movie? I mean, the pool to me is limited because I would require a transsexual. You know, my dream probably would be a Wachowski joint. Yeah, probably. I think they could master the sort of bug nuts nature of it. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay.
If anybody has a burning desire.
One more. Let's go again.
How do you know when you're done? Like, if you're the painter,
Mhm.
how do you know when the last stroke is painted and you're like, okay, I can't keep touching this?
I mean, the good news about when do I know I'm done? The good news about graphic novels is I know when I'm done with the last page. Like, I mean, no, but for real, like, 'cause it's written and then it's been edited, and then I know when it ends. So it is this weird thing where I get to the last page and I color the last panel, and I'm just like, guess I'm done. Like, and I just kind of stand up and just like stand there for a while, like, I guess it's over. Like, I'm gonna go get a drink or something. Like, I just don't. It is this weird thing where I almost never believe that I'm finished with it. Yeah, it's a weird long process where you go over the same work so many times. So by the time I am done with the last steps of it, I am done. You know, yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you to Mattie and Grace for celebrating with us tonight. If you're to the live stream, you can buy a copy of the book in the link in the description. If you're with us here, you can buy copies of the book at the front where you checked in. You can also buy Boys Weekend. You can pre-order Hercules.
Yeah.
You can buy the books. There's school starting soon. You're gonna need books for someone's school.
I don't know what school would let them read this book.
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
The mails haven't reached every district.
That's good.
I usually there's a holiday coming up, but I don't think there is.
National Girlfriends Day is tomorrow.
Okay, period.
I
am
my
very
lovely
nervous.
orders are
I'm
not going
expecting
Mattie is going to be sending and personalizing. So we will have you line kind of down the center aisle and then jut to the side around the table. I'm gonna very calmly walk Mattie down the center. Everyone's gonna be really chill about it. You're gonna talk to her in the sunny line. And that is all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.